This conference will now be recorded.
Well, in the last class, we discussed about lookup transformation, right? So lookup transformation is for to join the tables. If they are from same user or different user, we can use lookup transformation to join the tables. By default, lookup transformation will do the left outer join. So we have joiner transformation also to join the tables, but in joiner it supports only equal to operator in join condition. We cannot change that equal to operator in joiner transformation. If you want to use less than, greater than, less than or equal to, greater than or equal to, not equal to operators, we can go for lookup transformation. Okay, and then also in joiner transformation, we do not have property to write the SQL query, whereas in lookup transformation, we have a property to write the SQL query. Okay, so this is also 100% interview question, like the difference between joiner and lookup transformation. Okay, so most of the interviews, they will ask this question, difference between joiner and lookup transformation. Okay, so after that, we created the mapping to perform the SCT type 1 by using the lookup transformation. So for that, what we did, we have joined source with the target table by using the lookup transformation. Okay, so we created the lookup on the target. Why we created the lookup on the target table? Because as I mentioned here, we have to create a lookup table, or we have to set a lookup table from the joining table, which is a parent table or less number of rows table. Why do we have to set the less number of rows table? What will happen if you select more number of rows table? Means we know now we have these two tables, source table, target table. We created the lookup transformation on the target table, right? Okay, so target table for the first time it contains 0 records. Okay, so as soon as we start execution of the mapping, at the beginning of the execution, lookup transformation will create a static cache. Static cache is nothing but a temporary file will be created inside the Informatica server. Okay, so it's a copy of a lookup table. Inside the lookup table, whatever the number of records are there, with those records, the static cache will be created. For the first time, lookup table contains 0 records. That is the reason static cache also will be created with 0 records. So if you consider source as your lookup table, then there we have 3 records, right? So to create a static cache with 3 records, it will take some time and it will take space. Okay, so here we have only 3 records. It will not take much space. Suppose let's say if your source contains 3 million records are there, target table contains 0 records. Source contains 3 million records, target contains 0 records. Okay, so if I consider target as a lookup table, it will create a cache with 0 records because target table contains 0 records. And how much time it will take to create a cache with 0 records, or how much space it will take to create a cache with 0 records? It will take very less time to create a cache with 0 records. Whereas if you have considered source as your lookup table, source contains 3 million records, and now if it is going to create a static cache with 3 million records, how much time it will take? Will it take time or not? Yes. So with 3 million records, it should have to create a cache. So there it will take long time to execute, and also it will take huge space. It will create a file with MBs or GBs file. It will be created. The file size also will be huge. Okay, so that is the reason we do not select the table which is having the more number of rows table as a lookup table. Always we select the less number of rows table as a lookup table. Okay, so that is the reason we will be selecting the here in our scenario target table contains 0 records. Okay, and source contains more records. That's the reason we have selected the target as a lookup table. Not only as of now, we have to think about future also. In future, compare with this source and target tables, which table is going to have the less number of records and which table going to have the more number of records. Mean in future also, always before we start execution of any run, so source only can have the more number of records compared with the target. Okay, always when we are performing the SCD type 1 or SCD type 2 or anything, so compare between source and the target table, always source only will have the more number of records. Okay, so that is the reason while joining between source and target table, whenever we perform the insert else update or update else insert or SCD type 1 or SCD type 2, always we have to consider as a target as a lookup table. Okay, so because that will contain the less number of records, it will take less time to create a static cache, and also it will take less space to create a static cache. That is the reason. Okay, so after that we created the mapping, and then I explained how it will work. Like first time it will insert all the records, second time it will update only the specific rows and the specific columns, right? Okay, fine. Now here in our source table, so first time, let's say again we'll discuss the same mapping. So here we have zero records in our target table. Okay, so static cache created with zero records. After creating the static cache, from the source it will read the employee number 10. So employee number 10, here it will pass to that, employee number 10, it will pass to that lookup transformation. This as our input value, right? So like that it will pass the input value. As soon as lookup transformation receives the input value, it will look for the matching value inside the cache. Do we have the matching value here? No. If there is no matching value for 10, all the lookup transformations, we will get null. Employee number null, employee name null, address null, create date, update date. All these column values are null. The same employee number null, it will pass to the expression to the router, and the router it will pass those values to the below insert and update groups. Now in insert group is null of lookup employee number we have here. That's the reason insert group condition will satisfy, and it will send that record, and it will send that record to insert into the target table like this. So now it will insert the record like this: employee number 10, A, and then address HYD, create date, today's date 9/14/2022, and then update date also, it will be updated to the like this. First record inserted successfully. Now the second record. Okay, so second record started execution 20 BBLR 20, it has passed to the lookup transformation, and lookup it is looking for the matching value inside the static cache. Okay, so like that it has started processing the second record. Okay, during the execution someone manually inserted the record like this in the target table. Okay, so during the execution, someone inserted the record like this 30 C CNI, and then like that, someone manually inserted the 30 C CNI. I repeat, employee number 10 record inserted through our Informatica mapping. After inserting the employee number 10, now it has started processing the second record. It is executing, our mapping is executing to load row by row from source to target table. Okay, so our mapping is executing to load the row by row from source to target table. First row loaded successfully to the target table. Now it is started processing the second row. During the second row processing, okay, let's say there is another Informatica mapping. Our mapping name is M1. Assume our mapping name is M1. There is another Informatica mapping M2. Okay, so M2 mapping, some other team member he has created the M2 mapping. Okay, so in his mapping also he has used the same target table EMPL KPT1 like that. The same target table he also used. We have also used the same target table. The other mapping also used the same target table. Okay, source can be different, but they both are using the same target tables. So our mapping M1 also is having the same target table. That guy, whatever the other person has used a created M1 M2 mapping, so his mapping also is having the same target table. And assume now the time is 7 a.m. Okay, I have started execution my mapping at 7 a.m. That person also started his mapping at 7 a.m. There are two mappings, M1 mapping, M2 mapping. Okay, both the mappings are using the same target table and both mappings started at the same time. Okay, so if the both the mappings are started execution at same time, both mappings will try to insert the data into the same target table. So that is the reason here employee number 10 record inserted our mapping, employee number 30 record inserted in the same table by M2 mapping. Okay, so this employee number 30 we also have in our source. In our source table here we have employee number 30, but that employee number 30, that M2 mapping source also is having the employee number 30. So through that M2 mapping, this employee number 30 record got inserted during the execution. I repeat, there are two mappings, M1 and M2 mapping. Both the mappings are using the same target table. Okay, and they are loading the data into the same target table. Okay, and they have started execution at the same time. So there is one employee number which is employee number 30. So we also have in our source table employee number 30. The M2 mapping source also is having the employee number 30. Okay, so our mapping inserted the employee number 10. At the same time, their mapping inserted employee number 30 in this target table. Okay, fine. So let's say this mapping, this record employee number 30 record in this target table is not inserted through our mapping. That record inserted through some other mapping, which is M2 mapping. Okay, so our mapping after inserting the employee number 10 record, now it is processing the employee number 20. So employee number 20, it will pass to the lookup, it will look for matching value. There is no employee number 20. Okay, and that's the reason lookup employee number will be null. If the lookup employee number is null, insert group condition will satisfy and it will try to insert the record like this 20 BBLR, and this is created updated. So like that, this employee number 20 record inserted through our mapping. So our mapping inserted employee number 10 record into the target. Next in our source table we have employee number 20, that record inserted. Next in our source we have 30 record. So it will pass 30 to the lookup transformation. As soon as lookup receives 30, it will look for matching value inside the cache. So since there is no matching value inside the cache, all the lookup transformation will return null for our employee number 30 record. Since the lookup employee number is null, insert group condition will satisfy. So if the insert group condition satisfies, from insert group we have connected to the target definition and it will try to insert the record here for employee number 30. Okay, so our mapping inserted 10 record, inserted 20 record. Now it is trying to insert the employee number 30 record. So when it is trying to insert the employee number 30 record, will the table allow to insert employee number 30 record into the target table? Yes or no?
No.
Will it allow to insert this record? No.
No.
No. Why it will not insert?
Primary key.
Because the primary key is there on
Yeah.
employee number.
Exactly, because there is a primary key constraint. So we know if there is a primary key constraint, it will not allow to insert the duplicate values. Okay, we already have 30 here. Again, once again, if it is trying to insert 30, it will not allow. So it will fail the execution. Our mapping will fail. Okay, because someone has inserted, some other mapping has inserted 30. Our mapping also we have the same employee number and it is trying to insert the duplicate value and it will fail the execution. So how do we fix this? Our mapping has failed now because of the duplicate record. Our mapping has failed. Is it our mapping issue? We have written any incorrect logic inside the mapping? We don't have any incorrect logic. We have created mapping valid. Our mapping is valid. There is no issue with our mapping, right? So if this record has not inserted through other mapping, if this record is not going to be inserted, suppose let's say if this record has not inserted through M2 mapping, then in that scenario, is it going to fail our mapping? If that record was not there, then is it going to fail our mapping?
No, sir.
No, right? So it will not fail because we do not have the 30 already. So our 30 will allow to insert. Got it? But here, due to some other mapping is also having the same employee number, our mapping has failed the execution. So how to overcome this? Okay, so as per the requirement, there are two mappings, M1 and M2 mapping, and both the mappings are using the same target table. Both mapping should run at same time. So our mapping also business asked to run at 7 a.m. and their mapping also they have asked to run at 7 a.m. Okay, our mapping also business people they have asked us to run at 7 a.m. and their mapping also they have asked us to run the same time. If we don't want to fail, what is the other option? If we don't want to fail the execution, then is there any option what we can implement here? Any guess what we can do if we don't want to fail the execution? Now our mapping is failing the execution. If we don't want to fail, what is the other option we have?
We can update the time with a timestamp.
No, timestamp no. Here it will look further, it will look only in the primary key column. Because of the primary key column only it is failing, right? Doesn't matter whether the timestamp is same or do we have the timestamp here? Is it failing because of the timestamp?
Oh,
No, it is not failing because of the time. It is failing because of the primary key constraint here. Because the same key we are getting 2 times. That's the reason it is failing. It is not failing because of the timestamp. So, is there any other option? If we don't want to fail, what we can do? What are the possible ways we have if you don't want to fail our mapping? There are two mappings. Both mappings are using the same target table. Both are running at the same time, and both are having the same employee number 30. And from both the sources into the same target table, it is trying to insert employee number 30 record. Since there is a primary key, it is failing the execution. So if you don't want to fail the execution, what possible ways we have? What we can do? Any idea? No guess. Okay, so we'll see what we can do if we don't want to fail the execution. The first option we have now, as I told you, there are two mappings and both are running at the same time, 7 a.m. only, right? Okay, since they have started execution at same time we are getting these two records and it is getting failed. Suppose, let's say, if we are not going to execute M1, M2 at same time, M1 we have started execution at, suppose let's say one after the other if we execute, we have executed our mapping at 7 a.m. That is M1 mapping what we have created. Let's say we have started execution at 7 a.m. The other mapping M2 mapping, if we are going to run at 8 a.m. one after the other instead of parallelly running both the mappings at 7 a.m. So if we run first our mapping and then the second second M2 mapping, tell me in that case is it going to fail the execution? Are we going to get this record at 7 a.m. if we are going to execute one after the other instead of parallelly? Instead of parallelly execution at same time, what will happen if we execute one after the other? First M1 mapping, next M2 mapping. 7 a.m. at M1 mapping, 8 a.m. at M2 mapping. Like that, if we run, then is it going to fail our mapping?
No, sir.
No, right, it will not fail. Why? Why it will not fail? So 7 a.m. let's say we have started execution. If you have started execution, okay, so our source will have employee number 10, it will insert employee number 10, and 20 it will insert. 30 does not exist, it will insert the employee number 30, like this. Our mapping execution succeeded because M2 mapping has not started execution at 7 a.m. We have started 7 a.m. We have 3 records. For the first time, none of the 3 records present in the target table. All the 3 records inserted successfully. Next, at 8 a.m., the other M2 mapping will execute. M2 mapping, as soon as 8 p.m. it started creation execution. So M2 mapping will create a static cache with 3 records, and cache will have 3 records. And if there is, I mean, like for employee number 30, so since in the cache also we have 3 CNI, and they source also 3 CNI, so no insert, no update. So source record already present in the target table, and there is no change between source and target record. So M2 mapping also is not going to fail because record already exists and there is no change. It will no insert, no update, nothing will satisfy, it will just leave that record as it is. Got it? So in this scenario, is it failed the execution if we execute one after the other?
Sir.
So if we execute one after the other, it will not fail the execution. Okay, but now business people, they are saying no, you should not execute one after the other. You have to execute both the mappings at same time. I want both to be executed, started at same time. Okay, so if we execute one after the other, issue will get resolved. But business is saying as per their business requirement, they want both the mappings M1 and M2 should run at same time. Okay, so if the business is saying that to run the mappings at same time, so we should have to configure, we have to change our mapping. Even though both the mappings runs at same time, our mapping should not fail. Even though the same employee number 30 exists in both the sources and both the mappings, if it is trying to insert the employee number 30, our mapping should not fail. For that, what we have to do? That we'll see. Now let's say first employee number 10 does not exist, it has inserted. Next, it has started processing the employee number 20 record. Now both the mapping started at the same time. M1 mapping, M2 mapping, let's say they have started at 7 a.m. only. Okay, so our mapping inserted employee number 10 record, and this mapping, this record, employee number 30 record inserted through M2 mapping. Okay. Next, our mapping is going to insert 20 BBLR, okay, and 914, 20. So like that, our mapping inserted this employee number 20 record. So 10 and 20 inserted through M1 mapping, 30 record inserted through M2 mapping. After our mapping inserted 10 and 20, it will try to insert employee number 30 here. It will fail the execution. Okay, but if we don't want to fail the execution, what we have to do is, as soon as any new record is inserted inside the lookup table, immediately that record also should be inserted inside the cache. Okay, so static cache created at the beginning of the execution. Static cache created at the beginning of the execution with 0 records. But now, let's say during the execution, any new record inserted through some other source, if that record also immediately it is going to be inserted inside the cache, we will see what will happen. I repeat, during the execution, we know static cache will not be recreated and it will not allow to insert any of the records. Static cache will be created at the beginning of the execution and will be deleted at the end of the execution. But here now we have a requirement. Assume during the execution, whatever the new record inserted, employee number 30 record inserted through some other mapping, that record from the lookup table or a target table during the execution, it has inserted inside the cache also. Next, our mapping after inserting employee number 20, next it will start processing the employee number 30. 30 it will send to the lookup. Lookup will look for matching value 30 here. Now this time do we have 30? Yes, we have 30. So as soon as the 30 found, it will return the corresponding column values to lookup transformation. Same it will pass to the expression. Same it will pass to the router. Now at router transformation we have 30 CNI, 30 30 C CNI. Okay, so like that we will have the values. Okay, now since both the addresses are same, no insert, no update, it will just leave that record as it is. None of the group condition is going to satisfy for these values and our mapping is going to be succeeded. This time it has not failed the execution. Again, our mapping will not try to insert the same employee number 30 into the target table, because during the execution, as soon as any new record inserted inside the lookup table, immediately that record got inserted inside the cache. If this record, whatever the new record here, employee number 30 inserted through some other mapping, okay, so if that record immediately, if it is going to be inserted inside the cache, our mapping has not failed the execution. Okay, I repeat, if any record inserted inside the target table or a lookup table during the execution through some other mapping, okay, if that record immediately, if it is going to be inserted inside the cache at runtime, then our mapping is not going to fail the execution. But we are sure that the static cache, once it is created at the beginning of the execution, it will be locked. It will till end of the execution, it remains same. During the execution, it will not allow to insert the record or it will not allow to update any of the records. Got it? Okay, so whereas here we have a requirement that during the execution, the cache should be updated. Now the during the execution, this cache to be updated or inserted with a new record. So for that, it should not be a static cache, it should be a dynamic cache. We have another type of cache called dynamic. Okay, so at runtime, as soon as any new record is inserted inside the lookup table, if that record immediately, if you want to have inside the cache, then cache should be dynamic. It should not be the static. Got it? The difference between static and dynamic. Okay, this is also 100% interview question. Okay, every interview they will ask, what is the difference between static cache and dynamic cache? Without this question, there is no interview. What is the difference between static cache and dynamic cache in the lookup? Okay, static cache and dynamic cache both will be created at the beginning of the execution and both will be deleted at the end of the execution. Got it? Okay, so the way how the static cache will be created at the beginning of the execution, same way the dynamic cache also will get created at the beginning of the execution, and after loading the data into the target table, at the end of the execution, dynamic cache will be deleted, static cache also will be deleted. But the major difference between static and dynamic is during the execution, static cache will not recreate or it will not allow to insert any of the records. As soon as any new record inserted or updated in the lookup table, those records static cache won't allow to insert inside the static cache. Whereas dynamic cache, as soon as any new record got inserted inside the lookup table at runtime or during the execution, immediately that record also going to be inserted inside the dynamic cache. So that's the difference between static and dynamic cache. Only these 2 points you have to tell if they ask about the static and dynamic. Got it? I repeat, what is the difference between static and dynamic cache? Static cache, dynamic cache, both will be created at the beginning of the execution and both will be deleted at the end of the execution. Whereas static cache will not allow to insert any of the records into the cache during the execution. Okay, but the dynamic cache, as soon as any new record inserted or updated in the lookup table, okay, immediately that new record also going to be inserted inside the dynamic cache at runtime or during the execution. Okay, so this is 100% interview question. Got it? So you should have to go through again recording, write down the definition on in your notes. Okay, and before attending the interview, 100% you should have to be learn this one and you should be able to answer. Okay, remember Informatica is a small tool. It is not like other languages or other tools. So if you are learning other technologies or other any other tools, okay, there you will have many things to learn. Okay, but Informatica is small. Here we will have the limited concepts. Each and every concepts which I am explaining here, they are very important for interview. Okay, not only in interview, in real time also they are important. Okay, fine. So now you understand the difference between what is static cache and what is dynamic cache. Okay. Now we have a scenario here. The cache should be updated at runtime. For that we should have to go for dynamic cache. Okay, assume now uh, in our project, let's say we have another mapping where it is using the same target table and both are running at same time. So that is the reason we have decided to create a dynamic lookup transformation instead of in our mapping instead of static lookup. Okay, this is another interview question. Tell me, when we go for dynamic lookup, when we go for static lookup, in which scenario we should have to create a dynamic lookup transformation in our mapping, and in which scenario we have to create a static lookup in our mapping. This is another interview question. Okay, so again I will not share the separate interview question. So here during the class whatever I am saying you should have to note down in your notes. Okay, and you should have to read 10 times or 100 times. Okay, so what is the interview question here? So in which scenario we should have to go for static lookup and which scenario we have to go for dynamic lookup? Okay, so for that the answer would be, if the lookup table is getting the data only through one mapping, okay, or there is no any other source for that lookup table, then in that scenario we have to go for static lookup. Okay, I repeat, if there is a map, if there is a lookup table, if that lookup table gets the data through only a single mapping and there is no other source to load the data in that lookup table, in that scenario we have to go for static lookup. And in which scenario we have to go for dynamic lookup? So dynamic lookup, when do we have to go means, for example, there are two mappings, M1 and M2 mapping. Both the mappings are using the same target table, and in both the mappings we have created the lookup transformation on the same target table. Okay, and those two mappings are scheduled to run at same time. For example, let's say both are started execution at 7 a.m. Okay, so there are two mappings. Both the mappings are having the same target table. Okay, and they have started execution at same time, and both the mapping sources are having the same record, same key column value. Then in that case, it will fail the execution. To overcome that, if we create dynamic lookup transformation, as soon as any new record inserted or updated through M2 mapping into the lookup table, immediately that record also going to be inserted or updated inside the dynamic cache. In such scenario, we have to go for dynamic lookup, right? So you have to note down this one and you have to read 100 times. Because that's a 100% interview question. Next. Okay, so now we'll see how to create a dynamic lookup, right? Okay, so to create a dynamic lookup, what you have to do is, so after importing the source and target definition, create a source, create target, import source definition, import target definition. Now we have to join source with the target table by using the dynamic lookup. Okay, so for that, what we have to do, go to the menu transformation, and here in this list, we do not have specific transformation for the dynamic lookup. The way how we have created in the last mapping lookup transformation, for dynamic lookup also, we have to select the same transformation only, lookup only. For static and dynamic, you should have to select the same lookup. Okay, and we'll give the name as DLKP and then create, and then from this list we'll select our lookup table. So emplkpt, this is our lookup table, click on OK, done. Okay, so we have created the lookup transformation. Now tell me, is this the static lookup or dynamic lookup? Whatever the lookup transformation we have created here, is this going to create a
Static.
static cache?
Static cache.
Static cache, right? By default, this will create a static cache. We have not done anything inside this lookup transformation to create a dynamic cache. So by default, any lookup transformation will create a static cache. Now I want to configure this lookup transformation. Instead of creating the static cache, it should have to create a dynamic cache. So for that, what we have to do is right click, edit, open the lookup transformation, go to the properties tab, and then if you go here, one of the properties we have dynamic lookup cache property you have. So if you just enable this tick mark, okay, along with this, we also have to select this insert else update, this checkbox. So first a dynamic lookup cache, then insert else update checkbox we have to enable. So if you enable these two checkboxes, then this lookup transformation is configured to create a dynamic cache, and it will not create a static cache. We are not writing any program, just you have to enable the checkbox. Okay, so you should know. Okay, so to make the lookup as dynamic, what do we have to do? So there are two checkboxes we have to enable. First one is dynamic lookup cache, and then we have to enable the insert else update checkbox so that the dynamic cache will be created. Apply. Okay. As soon as you click on apply, okay, now this lookup transformation is configured to create a dynamic cache. And as soon as any new record inserted or updated in the lookup table, so immediately the cache also will get updated automatically during the execution only. Okay, the cache also will get updated. Now this is dynamic lookup because we have enabled the checkbox. Okay, so as soon as we enable the checkbox, here you can see along with these are the lookup table ports. In the last class we have seen, as soon as we create a lookup transformation, lookup table ports will be created. Along with this, we have also got another new port with the name new lookup row. Now we can see here a new port with the name new lookup row. Okay, so do we have this new lookup row port in the static lookup? Have you seen this new lookup row port in the static lookup?
Oh, sir.
No, right? So new lookup row port that will not be there inside the static lookup. New lookup row port will not be there inside the static lookup. Okay, so remember new lookup row port will be created inside the dynamic lookup only. As soon as we enable the dynamic cache, then the new lookup row port will be created inside the lookup transformation. By seeing the new lookup row port also, we can say that, okay, this is a dynamic lookup because here we have a new lookup row port. New lookup row port will be there only in the dynamic lookup. It will not be there inside the static lookup. By seeing this new lookup row port, we can easily say that, okay, this is a dynamic lookup, not the static. This lookup transformation is going to create a dynamic cache. Okay, fine. So after creating the lookup transformation in the last class, I have told you a few steps, right? What are those steps which we have to follow? After creating the lookup transformation, next step, what we have to do? Do you remember the next step? After creating the lookup transformation on the lookup table, what is the next step? Do you remember? No? Few of you already created the mappings, right? Last class mapping.
We have to connect the join.
What do we have to do?
We have to connect the joining port from source qualifier to lookup.
Yeah, we have to copy the joining port. The next step is we have to copy the joining port from source qualifier to the lookup transformation, right? So we have taken the employee number and we have copied that employee number to the lookup, right? Okay, that is in static lookup. So in static lookup, we drag and drop the only joining port. But here, if you have created the dynamic lookup, we have to select all the ports from the source qualifier, drag and drop all the ports to the lookup transformation. Not only single port, we have to copy all the ports to the lookup transformation. Got it? So if it is static, we drag and drop only joining port. If it is dynamic, we have to drag and drop all the ports to the lookup transformation. Why do we have to take all the ports to the lookup transformation? That we will discuss. Okay, so after drag and dropping all the ports, what is the next step we have to do in the static lookup? After drag and dropping the port to the lookup transformation, we have to, next step is we have to edit, go to the condition tab, we have to add the join condition. Join condition will be employee number is equal to employee number 1. That's it. Okay, so employee number is equal to employee number 1. We have added the join condition. And then what is the next step here we have to do? Okay, let me open this in a paint window. Okay, so dynamic lookup. Okay, first time we have source table, target table, and we do not have any records in the target table, right? So assume first time, as soon as we start execution of the mapping, so dynamic lookup transformation here, see, after we have the new lookup row port, and then these are the lookup table port, and we have drag and drop to employee number, employee name, address from source qualifier to the dynamic lookup transformation, and then we have added the join condition, right? This is what we have done till now here also, right? Okay, assume with that we have created the mapping session, workflow, everything, and we have started execution. So as soon as we start execute at the beginning of the execution, we know now we have the lookup transformation. It is ready to create the dynamic cache. Okay, so this lookup transformation will create a dynamic cache. And tell me with how many records the dynamic cache will be created? This lookup transformation with how many records the dynamic cache will be created?
With 0 records.
With 0 records, because we have 0 records in our lookup table, right? Okay, so we have 0 records. Got it? Okay, so after creating the cache with 0 records, then it will read the first record from the source 1A HYD. Since we have copied all the ports to the lookup transformation, it will receive a 1A HYD. As soon as it receives 1A HYD on the join condition, first it will look for the matching value inside the dynamic cache. So do we have the matching value inside the dynamic cache? Do we have matching value inside the dynamic cache
No.
for
No.
whatever it has received? No, right? There is no matching value. So if there is no matching value, we know all the lookup transformation ports returns the null, right? So in static also, if there is no matching value found inside the static cache, what will happen here? What values will get here at lookup transformation?
Null values.
All or null values. Lookup employee number null, name null, address null, create date null, update date null. Okay, so all the values are null. So lookup transformation, it returns null. Whereas new lookup row returns 1. New lookup row port, basically it returns either of these 3 values, 1, 2 or 0. New lookup row port, basically it returns either of these 3 values, 1, 2 or 0. When new lookup row will get 1. Okay, read this. If there is no matching value inside the dynamic cache. So do we have the matching value here? No. For whatever the input value we have received, for that input value there is no matching value. That's the reason we have got the new lookup row value as 1. Okay, so new lookup row, if there is no matching value found inside the dynamic cache, then new lookup row returns 1. Okay, fine. When new lookup row returns 2, that we will see. Okay, so suppose let's say we have one record in our target table here. Okay, 1 A, some USA created 1 2 something like this we have. So if there is a record in the lookup table, immediately that record also going to be inserted inside the cache. So here we have got that record. So assume there is a record in our target table. So as soon as we start execution of our mapping, since there is one record in the lookup table, so cache also will get created with one record. Fine, created. After that, it will read the first record from the source 1A HYD. 1A HYD, it will pass to the lookup transformation. As soon as lookup receives the input value, it will start looking for the matching value inside the dynamic cache. This time, do we have matching value inside the dynamic cache for whatever the input value it has received? Is there any matching record inside the dynamic cache?
Yes, sir. We
Yes.
have one matching record.
Yes, there is a matching record, right? Employee number 1, we have received 1 here, and in the cache also we have 1. Yes, there is a 1. So if there is a 1 here, then what it will do is, okay, so we know all the dynamic lookup transformation ports will return the matching value corresponding column values like this from the cache 1 to something like that. Whatever the values here we have inside the dynamic cache for the matching value, the matching value corresponding column values we will get at the dynamic lookup transformation. But dynamic lookup transformation, what it will do is, so after finding the matching value here, it also check or it also compare the values between source and the dynamic cache. As soon as the matching value found, then whatever the source, we are passing the source employee name, right? It will take the source employee name and it will check the dynamic lookup cache employee name, they are same or not. Yes, employee name also same. Then we are passing the address from the source to the dynamic lookup. It will take the source address and it will check in the dynamic lookup cache address is the same or not. Like that, dynamic lookup, each and every source column value, it will compare with dynamic cache column values. Okay, so if there is a matching record found inside the dynamic cache, as soon as the matching record found inside the dynamic cache, it will start comparing the other column values between source and the dynamic cache record. Source employee name, it will check with the dynamic cache employee name. Source address, it will check with the dynamic cache address. Now here, so is it same data we have between source and the dynamic cache record, or is there any change between source and the dynamic cache record for employee number 1? Is it the same, or is there any change between source and the dynamic cache record?
They are same records, sir.
The change in address, sir.
There is a change in the address. In this, here we are getting the address as HYD, whereas here in the dynamic cache address we have USA. There is a change, right? It is not the same. There is a change. From the source we are getting 1A HYD, whereas in the dynamic cache address we have USA. Okay, like that, if at least one of the column value is different between source and the dynamic cache record, that time new lookup row value will be 2. It will return 2. So now read this point, whatever here I have written. When we will get 2. So we will get 2 if there is a matching value inside the dynamic cache. Yes, we have the matching value inside the dynamic cache, and at least one of the column value is different between source and the dynamic cache record. At that time we will get 2. Got it? When new lookup row will return 2. Okay, now we know when new lookup row will get 1, when new lookup row will get 2. So new lookup row will get 1 if there is no matching value inside the dynamic cache, then new lookup row returns 1 always. When we will get 2 means if there is a matching value, if at least one of the column value is different between source and the dynamic cache record, then new lookup row returns 2. Okay, so how it is going to compare? So here we have written the join condition. Based on the join condition, it will take the source employee number and it will look for the matching value under dynamic cache employee number. How it knows that it should have to take the source employee name and it should have to look for the matching value inside the dynamic cache employee name, and how it knows that it should have to take the source address and it should have to look for the matching value inside the dynamic address. Okay, for that, what we have to do is after drag and dropping the ports, open the lookup transformation, go to the ports tab. Here we have associated expression. We have to associate the port. Okay, so employee number is already associated with the source employee number. This employee name we have to associate with the source employee name. ENAME1 means this is source employee name. Address we have to associate with the source address. Like that, if you associate employee number, employee name, address, first it will check based on the employee number whether the employee number exists inside the dynamic cache or not. If it exists, then it will start taking the source employee name and it will check with the dynamic cache employee name they are same or not. If they are same, then it will check source address, it will compare with the dynamic cache address whether they are same or not. So at least one of these column values are different, then new lookup row returns 2. For the create date, we do not have any associated ports in source. That is the reason we no need to keep this port, we can delete. Okay, update date also we are going to delete. So the create date, update date not required here because we do not have any corresponding ports in the source to associate. That's the reason we have deleted. Okay, so like that, if you associate the ports, then click on apply. Okay, then each and every row it will be compared with the dynamic cache row. Okay, so if at least one of the column value is different, then it will return 2. When we will get new lookup 0, if there is a matching value inside the dynamic cache and there is no change between static and the dynamic cache record. For example, here we have 1A HYD. Okay, here also we have 1A HYD. Okay, so in your lookup table you have HYD here, whereas in the dynamic cache also you have HYD. So in this case, so after creating the dynamic cache, it will read the first record 1A HYD. 1A HYD it will pass to the lookup. As soon as lookup receives 1A HYD, it will start looking for the matching value inside the dynamic cache. Yes, there is a matching value 1, and then it will start comparing employee name and address. So employee name here A and address also HYD. So is there any change between source and the dynamic cache record here?
No.
No, right? Since there is no change, so here new lookup row returns 0. So this is also important interview question. You have to remember like what is a new lookup row port in the dynamic lookup. Okay, so new lookup row it returns either of 3 values 1, 2 or 0. So if there is no matching value inside the dynamic cache, then new lookup row returns 1. If there is a matching value and if there is a change between source and the dynamic cache, new lookup row returns 2. If there is a matching value inside the dynamic cache, but there is no change between source and the dynamic cache record, then new lookup row returns 0. Like that, you have to remember the definitions of that new lookup row port values. Okay, so like that, so from the lookup transformation, and then we will take the new lookup row employee number, employee name, address to the expression, and from source we have to take all the ports to the expression and create it, update it. From here, same as last class mapping, expression, and then copy to the router. In router, you have to create 2 groups. One is insert group, the other one is update group. You have to create. Okay, so after creating the insert and update groups, next what do we have to do? So inside the router transformation, in insert group, you have to write this condition to lookup row 1. You no need to write. In the last class we discussed E is null of ENO, right? But here just you have to write new lookup row is equal to 1 in insert group. In update group, So since there is a change, we have to go for update, right? New lookup row is equal to 2. You have to write in update. And rest everything same. So here also you have to perform the SCD type 1. First time you have to execute and see whether all the records inserted inside the target table or not. Second time you update one record in the source table and see whether all the records got up, the specific rows and the specific columns got updated or not. Those things you have to verify. So only the change here is between last class and this class mapping. So there in the last class we created the static lookup, here the dynamic lookup. Inside the dynamic lookup we have copied the all the ports from source to the dynamic lookup, and then we have associated the ports in the dynamic lookup. Okay, and then we have taken new lookup row, employee number, employee name, address to the expression, from expression to the router, and in router insert and update groups. Okay, so in insert group we have written new lookup row is equal to 1. Update group we have to write new lookup row is equal to 2. And default we are not going to write anything. From insert group we have to connect to the target definition. From update group you have to connect it to the update strategy transformation. And then inside the update strategy, same way in the last class, employee number. Okay, and then address we have to take, and the update date we have to take, source address and update date we have to take, and from there you have to connect to the target definition. So if you have practiced last class example, this would be easy to create and understand. Okay, so only the difference here dynamic lookup, rest everything same as last class mapping. Right, so here in insert and update group you no need to write is null or not is null of conditions. You just have to write in insert group new lookup row is equal to 1. In update group you have to write new lookup row is equal to 2. And here also you have to verify to perform SCD type 1. First time you insert all the record from source to target. Second time you update one record in the source table, execute and see whether that record got inserted or updated inside the lookup table, that is target table. And then third time before you execute, you insert one record in the source table, execute and see whether that new record got inserted inside the target table or not. So like that you have to practice this one also, dynamic lookup. So dynamic lookup in real time very rare we create. Okay, this is only important for interview, but in real time very rare we create this dynamic lookup. Okay, in interview also if they ask in your project, tell me which lookup you have created. Have you created static lookup or dynamic lookup? You have to say in my project I have created only the static lookups. I have not created the dynamic lookups. Like that you can answer. Okay, very rare we get. So if they ask specifically like have you created the dynamic lookup in your project, you can say no, I have not created. I have created only static lookups I have created. Many of the times in real time we use static only, we do not go for dynamic lookup. Okay, so because dynamic lookup for every record whatever newly inserted inside the lookup table, so immediately the cache also will get updated. If there are millions of records, for millions of record, if the cache every time it is going to be updated, then it will take long time to execute. So that is the reason we will not try to implement the dynamic lookup. Very rare we create dynamic lookup, but in interview they will ask, tell me when do we have to go for static and when do we have to go for dynamic. And also they will ask, tell me what is the difference between static and dynamic lookup. Okay, so that's all about this dynamic lookup transformation. Fine, so that's all for the day. We will stop here today and then we'll continue tomorrow with another topics in the lookup. Tomorrow also we'll be discussing the lookup transformation. Fine, so tomorrow we'll finish the lookup and then we'll continue further. You practice this dynamic lookup today. Okay, and one more important point I just wanted to inform you, like I have seen few of you are not following the order. Okay, so and a few of you have not started practicing itself. So not even single mapping you have created till now, right? So if you are not practicing and if you have not started and if you are attending the classes day by day, it will no it you will feel the difficulty and you will get confused and you don't know where you are and from where you have to start, right? So every day I have been telling the same thing, to spend more time for practice. The more you practice, you will feel this tool will be very easy to learn. Okay, so if you don't practice, then day by day it will become difficult. You will get confused. You don't know why we are creating this one, why we are writing this logic and all. You don't know. All because of lack of practice. Okay, so if you have not started practicing, I have told you first class, 4_info recording I have already uploaded. Every day I'm uploading the recordings on the same link. Okay, so you have to follow same order. You should not miss single example also without skipping. You have to follow the same order to practice. Then you will feel very easy to learn. Okay, so don't miss the sequence. So first, if I have started with the source qualifier, and in the first class, after creating EMP_S1 EMP_ T1 mapping, then I have asked you to create 4-5 mappings with the different names like EMP_S1 to EMP_S S to T12, and then I have asked you to create a EMP_S13 and EMP_T13, like that 3-4 mappings I have asked you to create. Okay, so you have to follow the same thing, and 1 or 2 mappings. First mapping EMP_S and EMP_T or EMP_S1 or EMPT_T1. Practically I have shown you in our class, in that class. Okay, those 2 mappings, by watching the recording you can follow the same as it is, you can practice. Okay, and then from the third scenario onwards, whatever you learn from first 2 mappings by watching the video, without watching the video you have to start creating the mappings. Okay, without watching the video, whatever you have learned, okay, so you should have to try to remember, and without watching the recording, try to create a source table, target table, insert some records in the source table, execute command, and then import source definition, target definition, create mapping session, workflow, execute, and see whether you have got the data in your target table or not. That you have to see, right? So like that, so you should have to start practice. And I know few of you still watching the recording and doing the practice, right? So 1 or 2 scenarios in the first few classes, 2-3 classes, fine. By watching the video you can able to create a mapping. Slowly, you should have to stop watching the recording and try to remember how I have created there, and the same thing you try to implement in your mapping without watching the recording. So by watching the recording, if I have created the table there, then here also you create a table, and if I have imported the source definition, then stop the video. Here if you import the source definition, like that, initial few classes, fine. Okay, since you are in learning stage, you can, by following the video you can practice. But once you are familiar with the tool and the process and the steps, try to stop watching the recording and create by your own. So if you are not getting, again you watch the recording 2 times, 3 times, 5 times, 10 times you watch the recording. 11th time, whatever you understood and whatever you learned from the previous 10 times when you watch, so that you remember and try to create a mapping. So like that you should have to practice. You should have to spend more time to practice. The more you spend, you will get more confidence, and you can learn many things. Okay, but if you are not going to spend the time, then you will be behind, and then you will face the difficulty, you will get confused. Okay, fine, no problem. Even though if you are behind, so you should not miss the sequence, you should not miss the order. Whatever the order I have explained in the class, same order you have to try to create the mappings in your system. Okay, so don't feel that I am behind. So no problem, so you will not learn at a time all the things, right? So many of you are non-technical background. Okay, so for them it will take time, and it will you will face difficulty in the beginning. Okay, so if you spend more time, definitely it will become easy. And the only the thing is, you should not miss the order. In the same order you should have to practice. Okay, so instead of continuing in that order, if you try to create today's mapping without practicing all the previous mappings, then it's no use. So you don't know like what is condition, why we are writing the condition here. This router transformation expression without practicing, directly if you create this mapping, then you will not know why you are creating expression. You should have to question yourself why you have to, why here we are creating expression, why we are creating router and all, right? Okay, so that's the reason. Please do not miss the sequence. And the one who, I mean, like, so specifically, still who have not started practicing, for them, I'm requesting start watching from the first recording. In the first class, I have explained how to create a table, how to insert the records, and okay. And then in the Informatica first class, I have shown you how to create a table again and how to create a mapping and all I have shown you. So please start practicing immediately if you have not started practicing. Fine. So that's it. That's all for the day. So every day I have been keep on telling to practice because practice is more important. You are not going to join as a fresher. You'll be putting 4-5 years of experience. So for that, you should have to get more practical knowledge instead of theoretical knowledge. If you are a fresher, theoretical knowledge is fine. But since you are going to join as a experience, you should have to have more practical knowledge. So for that, you should have to do more practice. Got it? So please do more practice. And if you have any doubt, you can wherever you got stuck, you take the pic and send me in WhatsApp. As soon as I check, I'll reply to you. But you should have to spend more time. Got it? Clear, right? Any questions? Fine, that's all for the day. Thank you. We'll continue tomorrow.